Glorious day in Sydney to Australia's best motor racing facility, Eastern Creek Circuit, west of the city. Already in 3 previous meetings this year, we've had some wild and mad motor racing and some incredible incidents. There's nothing quite as crazy as the Holden HQs, or as close as the street sedans in Group E, or as unpredictable as the Formula Vs. The Formula 2 sound glorious, look and sound just like thoroughbred racing cars. The sports sedans are just brutal, and the Formula Brabhams efficiently fast. Today we have the final rounds of the Australian Sports Sedan Championship and also the TUI's Australian Drivers' Championship in the Formula Brabhams. Last weekend at Lakeside, the sports sedans had an incredible dust-up. There's lots of acrimony and a very close point score, as you can see. All of it won't be resolved on the racetrack today, but we'll hear more about that shortly from John Smales. In the Formula Brabhams, Mark Skaife is almost certainly the winner. Theoretically, Paul Morris can win it, but he's really got to rely on an enormous amount of bad luck from Mark Skaife to do so. Putting aside his driving gloves yet again and joining me in commentary, John Smith. And John, Mark Skaife really has earned his laurels in the Australian Drivers' Championship.
Oh, definitely. Well, Mark Skaife, probably the form driver of 1991, I would say.
And in various categories.
Oh, in touring cars, these particular cars, the Formula Brabham cars, which are very difficult cars to drive, and he's done it with great ease.
But a man who could upset him is the reigning Australian champion driver, Simon Kane. He's back for this meeting.
Yeah, Simon's been overseas racing in Formula 3000 in Europe this year with mixed success, but he's come back and he's really put a cat amongst the pigeons, and I think he'll do a good job.
Again this weekend, we've got new categories at Eastern Creek. Today, it's Sports 1300s and also rounds of the Porsche Cup. Some tremendous motor cars in that. But that's not all.
When motor racing enthusiasts gather, inevitably the big question is which category is the fastest. Well, today, Thalgo Cosmetics have put up a $20,000 prize purse to provide us with the answer. 7 categories of cars, each amongst the fastest in their classes, have gathered at Eastern Creek. Each will have 1 flying lap to determine which is the quickest and in what order. Horsepower is not necessarily the deciding factor. This Pontiac of Terry Byers puts out 450 kilowatts, but it's purpose-built for the colder Thunderdome in Victoria, and its chassis, and particularly its poor brakes, handicap it here at Eastern Creek. By comparison, Greg Crick's Honda puts out about the same horsepower, but it's got a purpose-built chassis probably as good as a Formula Brabham. And speaking of Formula Brabhams, Mark McLaughlin's Thalgo Spa gives away 200 kilowatts to the Honda, but it's lighter and it's without doubt the fastest car of the 7 competing in this showdown. The big question is how much slower will this Formula 2 car of George Parkinson be? Its 1600cc single overhead camshaft engine puts out about 140 kilowatts. And will the Formula 2 be any quicker than Glenn Seaton's Peter Jackson turbocharged Ford Sierra touring car? Now, this car has a power-to-weight ratio of about 380 kilowatts per tonne, and that's about the same power-to-weight ratio as this 750cc 4-cylinder 4-stroke superbike being ridden today by Scott Doohan, brother of motorcycle Grand Prix ace Mick Doohan. And don't forget this vehicle here. This has less horsepower than any other vehicle in the event. It puts out only 41 kilowatts from its 2-stroke single-cylinder Yamaha engine. But this supercar at Surfers Paradise earlier this year on the IndyCar circuit was faster than the awesome NASCARs.
Mark Skaife on pole position again, but just by 200ths of a second over Simon Kane, the reigning Australian champion driver. Mark Larkham, who dominated the first round, brings up the second row, along with Mark McLaughlin. Still hasn't got his car firing as he wants it. Paul Morris was last onto the grid. Tony Blanche, the second Thalgo car. Then it's Searle Hocking, just broken a drive shaft, been wheeled off the grid. Keith Carling, Brian Sampson, George Parkinson, and McCoy in 12th place. It's a 15-car grid now.
Mark Skaife, Simon Kane alongside you on the front row puts a guy with current European experience. Does that worry you at all?
No, it doesn't, John. It's just another competitor there, and what we're going to do is beat them all to the first corner, and there's 3 or 4 guys behind Simon that are just as big a heartache.
He says that his main way of driving now that he's come back from Europe is just to go for it at all costs.
Oh, well, that suits us. If we're going to knock the wheels off it, we might as well do it now.
Scaife versus Kane. Series point score for Scaife, one-off race for Kane. Best start for Scaife, but Kane's going well, so too is from the second row of the grid Larkham. But in fact it goes Scaife, Kane, Larkham. So they were very even.
Looks like either McLaughlin or Blanche in fourth place. One of the Thalgo cars.
And spinning wildly, we saw the dust a long time before we saw the car. Number 12 is Tony Blanche. Sydney property developer, didn't start racing till he was 27. And perhaps at this instant, he thought that was even a bad decision then. Very eligible bachelor. Scaife now moving away from Simon Kane.
Yes, Scaife's bolted. He's done a good job. Slipped away on the first lap, which is an indication of his experience as well. When you do as many miles as Mark Scaife has done this year, you get into the racing mode very, very quickly.
Yes, indeed. He's got a big lead, and then it is McLaughlin and Larkham absolutely side by side. McLaughlin on the inside. That's Kane, number 1 because he's the reigning Australian champion, and Larkham third. McLaughlin's fourth.
It's a brave move by Larkham, holding on around the outside. That is very brave. These cars doing 250 odd, 260 odd kilometres an hour down the straight. To go around the outside of someone, very brave.
As one of Australia's more famous radio announcers knows, because Doug Mulray drove car 11 during the week, and up in the garage there, he said 142 is the time to beat. 12 lapper, they're on lap 3. Scaife, Kane, Larkham, then McLaughlin.
They seem to have strung out a little bit. Scaife's got a good lead, and they sort of just seem to be fairly stagnant at this stage. No one seems to be trying to, or catching the other car. Scaife's car, very well set up. He's very good at diagnosing any problems that go on in the car and getting it sorted.
His Nissan team manager, Fred Gibson, looking after him here. He's got a lead of 2.65 seconds, and it's 2.85 back from second place Kane to third place Larkham. The 24-year-old Mark Scaife well in command.
It's Simon, 24-year-old, same as Mark. It's a good age to be involved in at this level. When you look at it, you can go on from there.
5 seconds now, the leader. Scaife's advantage. And it's 5.96, virtually 6 seconds back to third place Mark Larkham. This battle's further back in the field. 27, Paul Morris. In 28, Ron Searle.
Both these young guys, ex-Formula Ford racers, and Paul Morris has signed a contract for the Benson and Hedges team for next year for BMW. He's going to drive on the Benson and Hedges cars. And Ron Searle, this is his first outing in a Formula Brabham, and he's doing a damn good job. He's a quite aggressive young guy, and he's putting a very good effort in.
Indeed, it was Morris here in car number 27 who put in such a performance at the second Eastern Creek meeting rounds 2 and 3 of the TUI's Australian Drivers' Championship. Very confidently leading Mark Scaife for a major part of the race, although it's only been Mark Larkham that's taken a race win from this man, Mark Scaife. He did that in round 1, where Scaife was then busy with Mark McLaughlin and managed to fend him off with a car that wasn't quite as quick down the through the corners, because he'd had reduced wing on the car, reduced downforce, but it was very quick down the straight. It just enabled him to fend off Mark McLaughlin, who really became frustrated. And ever since then, really has run into trouble in the lead of the 2 Thalgo team cars. Mark Scaife averaging 166.36, down to the low 25s, but well capable, 23.2 in qualifying. And they don't go off their times very much, John Smith, during a race.
No, they should be able to run at that pace the whole race. they qualify in 23s. They should be able to race at 23s.
Mark Larkham in third place in car number 10. The only man that's taken a race from Mark Scaife this year in the TUI's Australian Drivers' Championship. Of the 5 that have been held previously, clearly won round 1. He made it a runaway win. But he hasn't been able to duplicate that ever since. Great shame, he's 26 years old, averaging 165 kilometres an hour, but out in the 25.7s, needs to be a couple of seconds quicker than that, really, to be on a hot pace.
Very well presented car, though, Will. It's nicely turned out. The team that behind him put in a lot of work, make the car good. It's been very reliable. He's had his share of problems in bits and pieces, and he's had a couple of body style changing, trying to get more straight line performance out of it. He's just a little bit off the pace here today.
Mark Larkham, lovely guy, and very talented too. And for Peter Boylan Racing, currently 4th in the championship, but quite a long way away. He's on 45 points compared with Scaife's 95. 89 Formula Ford champion. Very jolly guy, and like a lot of these blokes, both young, talented, and very dedicated to trying to get somewhere. But gee, trying to jump out of this pond into the pond in Europe is a most gigantic step. It really is not jumping out, it's leaping off the top board.
Yeah.
Scaife doing a very good job. The apple of Freddie Gibson's eye. And why not? Had a very exciting accident a year ago in the Grand Prix in Adelaide when the GTR went upside down in a big way and caught fire and everything. Absolute wreck, but he's coming down to the checkered flag now. Absolutely error-free, an immaculate race from Mark Scaife that takes him further ahead in the TUI's Australian Drivers' Championship, and does indeed guarantee him the title this year. So at 24 years of age, he will be one of the younger Australian champion drivers. Into third place comes Mark Larkham. So that 12-lap race gives these figures. Mark Scaife in a race time of 17 minutes 6.12 seconds, 9 seconds ahead of Simon Kane. A further 7 from Mark Larkham, or to Mark Larkham. Then it's Mark McLaughlin, Paul Morris and Ron Searle in the very close company that they were through most of the race. Production car races. Australia's own Holden versus Falcon coming down to the grid. They've got 2 8-lappers, 31.44 kilometres, and this time, as Jim Zarefos stood in the pits yesterday watching, Peter Fitzgerald took pole position with a 55.34 to a 55.78 for Zarefos. Wanless into third place and Bosanjak into 4th grid position. That completes the first 2 rows. Then it's McDonald and the giant-killing Porsche and the Suzuki. Mark Brabham backing him up, and Lewis in the Commodore, shamed by the 2 little 1.3-litre cars in front. Gordon Levin, a hard runner in the Commodore. Watkinson in the Corolla mixing it with them. Burton gets his Mitsubishi Lancer onto 11th grid position, along with Dare in the Suzuki Swift into 12th grid position, 6th grid row. In a field that sees this furious competition between the Goodyear Falcon and Commodore. Fitzgerald furthest from us on this occasion, Jim Zarefos closest to camera there, and Mal Rose with us instead of being down there among the maniacs, as they get away now for 8 laps, 31.44 kilometres, and in car number 9, Gary McDonald doing well. And Mal, the start's pretty critical.
Oh yeah, terrific start from Jim Zarefos and the Falcon. He just managed to get that torque down and off he went, pulled second, and just managed to nip into the front of Peter into the first turn.
So Falcon leading the pack at the moment, a big lock-up further back. And slotting forward rudely was Terry Lewis, good on him. He didn't actually drive it into that position, the car catapulted itself.
Yes, I think when you've got locked all your steering up in the front, you're in the laps of the gods at that particular stage.
There are not many gods in this field. Bosanjak on the inside of the McDonald there. But everybody else getting into line astern, looking for an optimum entry to the corner, all chasing Zarefos, then Fitzgerald.
Well, do you think the the Falcons have a bit more of an advantage around here than a Commodore.
Yeah, well, John, the advantage the Falcons got, and it's proven with Jim Zarafos winning nearly every round here, is the torque of the engine. In third gear, out of these hairpin corners, the Falcon just able to pull 2-3 car lengths on the Commodore.
That orange car of Todd Wanless, number 65. The Wanless family, famous and notorious in motor racing, as well as in scrap metal recycling. Yes, in fact, Zarafos was saying onto the straight, he said, oh, the NEC car out far too wide, but recovers well. But Zarafos was saying onto the straight, you rev it far too hard in second. You think you're going fast because of all the revs and the noise. Third, it's too slow, but it just gets going at about 4,000 revs in third gear on the exit of that corner onto the straight that starts to pull away. But he's not quite as ideally geared as he'd like to be. Down the straight, though, he's holding his own well against Fitzgerald by 0.8 of a second. More than a second back to third place. Down the end of the straight here, where Zarafos's lead's gone out to 0.92 of a second, and the gap to third's 2.83. Down the end of the straight, it's a bit of a dab, isn't it? You've got to bring it back from more than 200 kilometres an hour to what? Say 190, boy, Wanless. Very sideways, but hung on to it well, and that would have been a very big moment.
Emulating his father, I'd say, at that particular stage. His father, an old speedway man.
Sideways again.
Todd's having a good go here.
As Fitzgerald narrows the gap to 0.73, but to third place, number 41, it's gone out to 4.65. That's Terry Bosanjak in third. And he's got his hands full too. A great old battle going on there with Gary McDonald in 9. Gary McDonald is not the actor. Oh, dear, oh me. Very unconventional. Todd Wanless doing it right. And again, an exciting time for Terry Lewis in 7. That's twice he's had four, at least, that he's had four wheels clear of the track, and puts him back behind the Action Suzuki of, is it Brabham or Forshaw there?
I think Lewis gets a fair bit of publicity for his sponsors, if nothing else. He's not
Forshaw it is.
He's not making a lot of headway on the leaders, but he's obviously getting a fair bit of TV time.
So Bosanjak and McDonald arguing over third place. The two Goodyear Commodore in second and the Falcon in first, battling for the lead. And this tremendous battle going on back behind the McDonald and Bosanjak battle, but it's a beauty. Really close company, the sort of stuff that does fire up a driver.
Yes, the general will certainly be pumping the little Suzuki guys here, and now they're top guys to race with. There's no real biffo in these guys. They just drive them hard.
You couldn't biffo the little Suzuki. They've got no weight. You'd shake your head and say, what was that? As 7, Lewis, goes by the Forshaw Suzuki, 43. He comes forward a place, and he is making some good headway.
This is where the little Suzuki comes into its own and catch up all that little lost in the straight.
Good move. And Lewis right down the inside, firstly of Todd Wanless in 65, and then Gordon Levin in 8. And up at the front, the charge is on from Fitzgerald on Zarafos. Really close and trying to set him up, but getting a little bit untidy. So the order unchanged at the front end of the field. Falcon Zarafos leads Commodore Fitzgerald. And further back, this is the further progress of Lewis on Wanless after taking Forshaw in the previous corner, down 2 cars at this corner, inside Gordon Levin finally, and since then, after a slow lap, Todd Wanless has retired. And the straight 6 of Jim Zarafos still doing the job over the V6 Commodore. Peter Fitzgerald, his Goodyear teammate, in behind, squirting now up to the last double apex corner before they come round onto the straight and rush down to the finishing line. And Fitzy's not close enough to do anything about the smooth driving, the precision of Jim Zarafos in the Falcon. Down to the flag, and Fitzgerald is slipstreaming, very close to him, but not quite close enough and just over. A car length between them as the checkered flag comes out. Big margin back to Bosanjak in 41, but he's in control of that battle with Gary McDonald in car number 9, and it will be Terry Bosanjak into 3rd place, Gary McDonald into 4th in 9, into 5th, and thanks for entertaining us, Terry Lewis in 7, and then 42 took next, Mark Brame over Forshaw in 43. The giant killing Suzukis.
Terry Lewis, king of the street registered class, and now having a go in Group E. Terry, how did that feel, your first run?
The first run, it was very difficult for me because I didn't know where to start on what sort of revs, but the takeoff was excellent, I thought, and coming around the back section there, I was on the dirt there. I went underneath the 2 markers and then came back on the track. There was another stage there where I've come in underneath 2 cars, and then, it was a good race.
It's all part of the learning curve, I guess, Terry.
It is. I will get better as time comes along and as we progress the car.
Not only is Eastern Creek a magnificent near 4-kilometre road racing track, this weekend it is absolutely buzzing to motocross, to drag racing, and all manner of mad bikes. The drag racing bikes can get as quick as 7 seconds for a standing 400. There's quad racing as well. They're doing some of it today, but the full program here in the Australasian Motorcycle Masters tomorrow at Eastern Creek, west of Sydney.
Final round, the Sports Sedan Championship has been thrown into chaos. A crash which stopped round 12 at Lakeside ripped the front end off Mick Monteroso's Escort and did major damage to Des Wall's Supra and to Gary Scott's Jaguar.
It was the hardest race I've ever been into. Hard and fast, nothing given, nothing taken.
And whose fault was the accident?
Mick Monteroso went for a little gap that just wasn't quite there. He touched Des Wall. They both spun, but unfortunately into the path of my car.
But that's nothing compared to what a subsequent appeal, mounted by Greg Crick, has done to relationships in the sports sedan ranks. Crick protested the points which were awarded for the crash-shortened race. And while they've given him an additional 30 points in the title, they've ruined a beautiful friendship.
I cannot agree that people that crash and cause a red flag incident can be awarded a race victory.
I just feel that it's not sportsmanlike to go about it the way he has. That's all I can really say at this stage.
Well, you were good friends before Lakeside. Now you're not talking.
That's right. We were buddies, and we helped each other all the way through the championship. Not just with him, but everybody else as well. But it's just put a sour note on it. That's all.
The final 2 rounds of the Coca-Cola Australian Sports Sedan Championship sees Greg Crick on pole position, the man leading in the point score over the fast-starting Mick Monteroso. Gary Scott, one of 3 drivers involved in that controversial incident up at Lakeside. Des Wall in a Supra. The 3rd row kicks off with Kerry Bailey and Beninka, and then it's Ian Luff and Barnes in the Chevy Monza. And then Terry Shield, a very lightweight but fairly low-powered car, Brian Smith, Griffin and McFadgen in 59 in what is a 15-car field. Green says go, and it's again Monteroso blasting away and Greg Crick chasing. Gary Scott did well initially, but then couldn't hold it together. And he's, in fact, Crick even is in 3rd place. Gary Scott's, what, 6th? The big heavy Jaguar.
Good start from Des Wall as well. He bounced the big Supra out from the 2nd row of the grid and to be in 2nd position, doing really well.
Monteroso set them all a target to chase now. Gary Scott out wide there. The XJS, one of the cars, that there it is, got remodeled with Brian Smith tucked in behind him. Got remodeled up at Lakeside. Monteroso also. As the incident was reported, Monteroso was challenging for the lead, clipped the Toyota Supra of Des Wall up at Lakeside. Gary Scott ran into them, and it was a top gear accident just after the bridge at Lakeside. It was very high speed. They couldn't restart the race, so it was declared with more than 3/4 of the race run. Earlier in the day, Monteroso won the 11th round, but now Crick's up into 2nd place. Des Wall's 3rd, Kerry Bailey's 4th, Gary Scott's 5th. Coming round to complete lap 2 in 8. Monteroso holding on. And indeed Kerry Bailey coming through on Des Wall back at 3rd and 4th.
Here's an opportunity for Crick now under brakes. His car is better under brakes than the Escort.
Monteroso would be happy to leave him hanging there, though. It's a great battle further back. You can see Gary Scott in there too. Very busy indeed in Des Wall's car. Kerry Bailey comes through, so he goes up into third place, and Gary Scott comes up into fourth. So in one whisker, Wall's gone back from third to fifth, and Scott's looking for a way through to third, but can't find it.
A bit of damage under the rear flare of the Monteroso car from Crick leaning on it through the corner about half a lap ago.
Watch Monteroso on the exit. He'll try and stay in fairly tight. He came back pretty quickly. It's a fast blast up to here, and behind them is tremendous action there. You see that it's Gary Scott leading a bunch of cars. Bailey, Des Wall's gone back, and Brian Smith sixth.
Yes, Scott's moved through. He fell back to sixth place on the first lap. Now he's up to third, and he's improving on the cars in front of him as well.
Monteroso always looking for the optimum run onto the straight because it's critical for him. He's out a fraction wide. Crick is better on the apex there on the final corner. He tucks in behind Monteroso, says, I'll have some draft, tow me along, and I'll see if I can pull out a little bit later down the straight. Up into top gear, and Monteroso's the quicker of them.
He seems to win the drag down the straight every lap.
And Gary Scott and Kerry Bailey coming up closer, and Crick's got it. And I think Monteroso's sunk now.
Yeah, Monteroso let him ran too wide there and let Crick through the inside. Bit of smoke coming from the back of the Crick car as well, so that's not really good.
So Mick Monteroso, great fending for 3 laps there. But look at the gap that Crick's already opened, and it shows how effectively Monteroso was stopping his progress. That's the second very nearly. It's at least 7 or 8 tenths. Gary Scott will be a threat to Monteroso very shortly, and that's the last thing he needs in terms of championship points. Have a look at it. Monteroso.
Right out in the boonies, right out wide. He's let Crick slip through. I think Monteroso just went too deep into the braking area at the end of the main straight, ran out wide, and obviously paid the penalty.
And one of the frustrating things is, you know, 2 or 3 seconds before he arrives that you've done it, and you can't get your car back there, can you?
It's too late.
You can see it happening. See, the ground shakes as they thunder past.
Bailey car trying to slip through the inside, which he's done. Guy in the stereo getting knocked over in the rush.
Just drive would be a better plot, I think, rather than flapping his arms about in the air. And Scott's back.
Around the outside, big move from Scott. That's a very heroic move to get around the outside. Scott is a very accomplished driver. He's driven for the Nissan team in 3 or 4 years ago when they were running the Skyline Turbos. Had pole position at Bathurst a number of years ago. And he's a very aggressive driver.
Yeah, motor racing family, 2nd generation race driver. His father, Glyn, a very accomplished single-seater driver. Very rarely ventured into other cars, even sports cars. And I think only once or twice into sedans and down the inside, but not going on with it. Scott there. Monteroso shaking him off rather than fending him off. And Glyn finally killed at Surfers Paradise Circuit. A much-loved single-seater driver back in the days of Leo Gagan, Greg Cusack and others. Always had some nice cars, some early monocoque Lotuses, Lotus 27. And shoveling the big nose in there, and knowing that Kerry Bailey's in behind, threatening. Great battle for 2nd.
So Gary's brother Tony does an excellent job. He drives the production cars, does an excellent job with that as well. Here we're coming onto the straight again. We'll just see that the Jag comes on better, but the Escort definitely has more straight line.
Checkered flag it is for Greg Crick, victorious over Mick Monteroso, then Gary Scott, Kerry Bailey. Gary Scott sliding inside Monteroso, who gets the nudge. And that was just some of the battling that was going on in that second last round of the Australian Sports Sedan Championship that saw Greg Crick victorious, adding to his 30-point margin over Mick Monteroso. Gary Scott picking up 3rd, Kerry Bailey 4th, then Brian Smith, Des Wall in the minor placings. Moving down onto the grid now for the first time at Eastern Creek in the BASF Australian Porsche Cup. And they're forming up in this order. Peter Fitzgerald on the pole, Chris Hones beside him, with them in car 35 and Broadbent in 77. But then it's Loipour and Nicolaides. Now, Nicolaides in car 2, one in with an overall series win potential this year, along with Chris Hones. Then it's Withers and Tankard behind him. That's one of the things they're racing for, tankards. Leonard and Norris. Norris has a V8 engine in one of the mid-engine type cars. Have a look at that in a moment. Harburg and Troost in car number 50, a real mix of cars, and two classes, A and B, determined by power to weight ratio. An interesting way of doing it, so that irrespective of either of those figures, you have to compare both of them, and anything above 4.4 kilograms per kilowatt, and that's Chris Hones' class, puts you into class A, and above 5.4 kilograms per kilowatt of power puts you into class B, and that's where Nicolaides is racing, and they are on adjusted points, just 2 points apart. They get underway now for this 6-lap race. It's 23.58 kilometres, and all I don't know is what they're going to do if their car phones ring in the middle of the race.
I think you're being a little bit cutting there, Will.
There's some of the 914, 916 types, and one of them's become a 918. In other words, it has a V8 engine in the middle, a car that was really the Vox Porsche at one stage.
So Chris Hones got a good lead. He's jumped out well, and actually Fitzgerald, who was on pole, actually blew the start completely and has fallen back to about 4th place.
That's in his 944. This car, number 6, is one of the wild number of variants of 911. Qualifying in around the 43s, so they're actually not as quick as those purpose-built little racing Sports 1300, the Clubman type cars.
Second place was Rex Broadbent, who's doing a top job in the car. He's come up from the second row of the grid. Very pretty looking car.
You can see the 911s do everything the critics always say they do. The tail going outwards fairly frequently.
Fitzy just snuck through around the inside of the corporate hill there. His car is being the 944, more conventional type of car, and has been his day-to-day transport as well.
The final 2 rounds, and drivers have to drop around, and oh boy,
looks like
off goes the rear window from 42 with the brakes clamped heavily on Stephen Leonard.
There's bits of windscreen and everything flying off that one, isn't it?
A lot of these cars are now pretty lightweight, and oh dear.
That's a brake marker's gone out somewhere. He's taken one of the brake markers out. Hones skipped away to a good lead now, and I like Fitzy's just wearing it down a little bit. He's had to work quite hard to get past Rex Broadbent.
Plenty of slipstreaming down the straight from Mike Tankard in 7 and Andy Nicolaides in 2. And have a look at the debris. They clean up some of the foam.
As you probably know, Will, that'll be a very dramatic corner for someone in the Porsche if they happen to lift off the throttles halfway through that sweeper.
I think we've got evidence of that. One driver. But really probably a greater percentage of the total number made of Porsche's race than of almost any other mark, I think. And this has been a common scene at Le Mans for more than 20 years. Porsches like this, honking along, grinding their way through day and night, and seldom braking. Alan Hamilton won an Australian Championship Sports Sedan in the 935, which is this basic body, very rudely modified, and about 700 horsepower of adjustable turbo engine, but still the basic flat cylinder, flat 6 air-cooled engine of these cars. But then Porsche's made some of them for racing. As we see a change of place, there's Nicolaides comes forward on Tankard.
There's a bit of waving going back and forward, letting someone through. Nicolaides trying to scrape through still.
Exciting stuff with a rear engine. The engine out behind the rear wheels. It's not a mid-engine car.
defies all really motoring logic to have a motor stuck right out the back. It would be like a big pendulum, but Porsche seem to overcome these problems with an amazing lot of development. Here's the move from inside.
Peter Fitzgerald been making good progress in a car that's much better balanced, really, than the 911 in front.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah, the car, the Fitzgerald's car is more of a conventional style of car. The engine smacked between the wheels rather than hanging out the back of the car, and it's turbocharged, and it's got a fair bit of power and performance. And he's worked away, and he's caught up to Hones now. Although Hones has still kept a good timing. That's 1:44.3. Average of 135.63 Ks. He's still doing the job. Fitzy locking a brake going into the sweeper. This is where his car's good there. Well, Fitzgerald's car comes on well because of the balance of the car. With the rear engine car, you've got to wait till everything straightens up and then get on the power.
Leo Gagan once said when he was racing the Grace Brothers Porsche many moons ago, he said from the moment you take off, it wants to swap ends. I don't know if that's entirely kind, because and round the outside goes Fitzy. I suppose if you're racing against Porsches, the place to take a 911 to look good if you were in a 944 front engine car would be round the outside.
Round the outside.
So on his final lap, it's Peter Fitzgerald well in control now, and indeed he might have just been lurking over Hones, because he's rushing down towards the finishing line to win this second last round of the Australian Porsche Cup. Chris Hones, who led from the start, comes home into second place. Harry Witham's a fair way back in the yellow 911, number 35. Rex Broadbent appearing in 77, down towards the finishing line. Plenty of those scuff marks on the track from those 911s when they took off, confirming the result. Fitzgerald from Hones from Witham, bringing up the minor placings, Rex Broadbent, Andy Nicolaides and Danny Loipour. And now the final round of the Australian Porsche Cup, round 7. And from the front row of the grid, it's Chris Hones diving away ahead of the field again. Fitzgerald tucking in behind him, not getting away as well in the front engine 944 turbo. So Hones got the advantage, but can he hang on to it? And a great battle too for the Cup. And really locked up and in trouble is Witham in 35, still in trouble. But when you get into trouble in those, you're in a fair deal, and he hung on to it. Now it's Tankard and Nicolaides back in 5th and 6th place and having the same sort of battle that they had in the first heat. Down out of the hairpin after Corporate Hill. And at the front end, Hones and Fitzgerald still at it. 1 and 2. But Fitzgerald now in trouble and retiring and leaving the lead to Chris Hones in this final round of the Cup. Harry Witham running in second place in 35. And Hones streaming on towards victory, confirmed ahead of Witham, Broadbent, Nicolaides, Mike Tankard and Danny Loipour, bringing up the minor placings.
The winner of the Porsche Cup for 1991 and a winner for the 3rd time in 5 years, Andy Nicolaides. Congratulations.
Thanks very much, John.
It was very close, only 1 point in it with you and Chris Hones.
Yeah, there was. I had to drop a round at Sandown that was 12 points. I only dropped 3, so it made it a bit hard.
Andy, why do you go Porsche Cup racing rather than perhaps touring car racing?
Oh, it's cheap motor racing. I mean, this one's probably cost me about $8 grand for the year, mainly on tyres, and it's been so reliable.
And what you've ended up with is the closest national victory at Eastern Creek today.
That's right. Terrific. Thanks very much.
This is a moment to treasure for 14 kids from Canteen, Association Cancer in Teenagers. Getting into cars that many people dream of riding in, but few ever get the privilege. Going around a race circuit for 3 laps and meeting some of their driver heroes, and helped willingly by all these Porsche Cup drivers and a couple of others as well, Tony Blanche and Mark Scaife, coming along to give these kids a tremendous thrill.
Melinda, how was that?
It's scary. Not like your ordinary drive into the city.
Did you like one?
I'd love one. Anybody that wants to donate one, yes. I'm old enough to drive.
The showroom-type sedans forming up for 8 laps of torture around Eastern Creek, and to be headed from pole position by Peter Fitzgerald ahead of his Goodyear teammate in the Falcon, Jim Zerafos. Then it's Wanless in the Falcon, Bosenjack in the Commodore, McDonald Commodore, Forshaw in that beautiful little Suzuki Swift, backed up by Mark Brame in car 42, Lewis in the Commodore, Levin and Watkinson, Commodore versus Corolla, then Burton in the Lancer, and Dare, another Suzuki Swift. A little bit of movement by Wanless, but he steadies it before the flag drops. And they bolt away, and it is Zerafos from the outside of the front row doing fractionally better than Fitzgerald. Not quite, yes, he is. And going with him's Bosanjak. And they still haven't sorted it out, still not resolved. Fitzgerald ought to be trying to hang on down the inside of Bosanjak, and he does. Says, pardon me, I'll have this. And car number 8 in there is Gordon Levin. So, most of them managing to get through, but here's a big problem. Gee, Levin just fed it back on, and he did it well, John Smith. He could have T-boned about 3 of them.
He's a very lucky man to get back on again, Levin, but he made it. It was shades of the previous race meeting here, which caused a major disaster for about 5 cars.
And clear of all the mayhem is Jim Zerafos. Fitzgerald, is Bosanjak,
Zerafos opened a good gap now. He's got a good lead for a half a lap. It's been excellent. 65-minute penalty.
Mr. Todd Wanless. And here's why he got it, because he was nearly up on the front row of the grid by the time they dropped the flag, but he was stationary and then got away badly. But the rules still say, John Smith, don't they?
Yes.
That if you've moved,
if you move past the line, then it's considered a minute penalty.
So Zerafos versus Fitzgerald in the order that they've generally been this year. Very hard man to toss, Mr. Zerafos. 0.3 of a second only his advantage, but it's enough, and it's 2.94. Back to third placed Bosanjak. So these two romping away and doing virtually identical lap times.
Here's a move from Fitzy up the inside. He should have this. Looked like Zerafos just opened the door and let him in.
Yeah. Does. So Commodore goes to lead over Falcon.
I don't remember you doing those sort of things to Fitzy, Mel.
No, Peter and I tend to rub our door handles and mirrors more than let each other past.
11's about to make a move on Bosanjak.
0.4 of a second between the leading pair, but back to this battle between Levin and Bosanjak. 4.15 now, really lengthening.
Bosanjak down the inside again, and he's got away with it. A bit of a locked up break. Levin's going nowhere at this stage.
But if he can hang there, he'll head him over the next section.
Yes.
And all he's got to do is run him out wide here as Levin prepares for this sweeping right-hander. Goes slightly uphill.
That's what you call running wide.
I reckon I might go all right in this category. You've got the right idea. Just turn slightly left.
Let's let Lewis catch up to the pair again, and if I was Levin, I'd be a bit worried about that.
Oh,
there's Lewis. It's a very spectacular boy.
Imagine what would happen if he tidied up his act, because he's in among them.
That's right.
With wasting all sorts of amount of time. That's Terry Lewis in number 7. Todd Wanless in 65 has come through. One of the few Falcons here, despite the success of Jim Zerafos. If you're putting your money down, Melrose, on the car next year, as you hope to do, what would you go, Commodore or Falcon?
Well, I'd have to stick with the Ford product. It's a better balanced car, right through under brakes and power. I'd stick with the Ford for next year.
All tracks considered, is the more winning car of the two? Well, look at this little battle. Sorry, Mel, we'll come back to it.
No.
Todd Wanless squeezing his way through in the Falcon, trying to hang on to Terry Lewis, and, well, not saying sorry to the Suzuki, but saying you don't mind if I ignore you. And that's 43 Jeff Forshaw.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic form of racing, these Falcons and Commodores, and you know, if I had the choice, you know, I did have both cars this year, and the Falcon has won 6 out of 8 of the production car rounds, so the Falcon was the dominant vehicle on all circuits.
And dominating at the moment is the Falcon and Jim Zerafos.
He's got through up the inside. There's a move on Fitzy.
building their margin over third place, and it's Fitzgerald to the lead. Beautiful slipstreaming.
Yeah, it's a good move. He's dived down the inside the right time. And obviously he's got a little bit up his sleeve, but I still think that so is Zerafos.
Mr. Fitzgerald being a little bit generous there.
Yes, leaving a gap.
A little bit of debris being picked up off some other cars, side by side. Fitzgerald was on the wrong side, but he leapt back and decided to follow Zerafos through. So it's the regular order of Zerafos, Fitzgerald, heading towards the finishing line. Ford Falcon ahead of Holden Commodore. Fitzgerald coming down beside him, though, heading towards the finishing line in what could be a real upset. The crowd is up on its feet and cheering, and it's Commodore in front. It's Fitzgerald by half a car length over Jim Zerafos into second place on this occasion. Great finish to this Group E race. Into third, Terry Lewis, and one can hardly believe that. 7, and then 9 coming down. Charging through was Gary McDonald, just dispatching Jeff Forshaw in 43. So 9 just at the flag also grabbed one position better, but the man who did it better than anybody was Peter Fitzgerald.
Peter Fitzgerald and Jim Zerafos, sensational racing. Is this the end of Falcon domination at Eastern Creek, Peter?
Well, you know, it's a bit sad to say that our cars come good at the end of the year, but it's looking good for next year, and you know, at least we can give Jim a hard time now, so we're really pleased with the day's result. You know, he's a hard man to race against, and if he hadn't have put a foot off the dirt at the last, my brakes were a bit sus at the end and he got under me over there. I didn't want to hit him because we are teammates. And I put a wheel off. He put a wheel off which enabled him to get the run down inside of him.
Jim, you've still been the dominant force here at Eastern Creek in this production series this year. What's your feeling as the series now wraps up?
The Falcons still have the advantage on some of the sections, but with the development Peter's been doing over the last couple of weeks, there's the gap has been bridged, and there's not much in it. In qualifying, Peter was a dash quicker, and I think it's a sign of the times. Maybe it's a time for Commodores to be quicker here, but we'll be out doing our best again next time and try to beat him again.
100 cars appearing at Eastern Creek for the first time, forming up in the grid for their first race. It's a 10-lapper, and here's how they start. Keith McClellan, the 38.69. John Burton, the 42.08, so McClellan well clear. Bruce Durbin, 42.95, and David Barham, 43.4. Colin Memory, a 43.82, fairly close, and a 43.83, just 100th to Le Masuria. Wesley Inkster, 43.96, and 44.85 for John Bishop. Then Alan Swains, a 46.36. Kevin Leggett, Philip Shaw, and David Williamson for the Sports 1300 Association, a 46.6 in car number 22. 19 cars to start in cars that used to be called Clubman, and they used to be in 1300 and 1600 form. On this occasion, or these days, for some years in fact, only 1300 cc, some of them very old, but remarkably efficient little cars. Must be front-engined, must be live rear axle, no independent rear suspension. Some of them have Morris Minor rear ends, perhaps 125, 130 horsepower out of the best of them, and it's very low cost and surprisingly quick motor racing. 3 cars, including Bruce Durbin in 53, not ready for the warm-up lap, so starting from pit lane, and starting already is David Barham in 46 from the second row, hesitates. Keith McClellan jumps well then. Barham's really slow for the Coca-Cola sign, so suffers for that hesitant start as McClellan goes into the lead. Barham way back.
Yes, I'd say he actually penalised himself as well. Well, he jumped the start, moved up the front row, then missed the jump, missed second gear, did everything wrong.
Yes, he did do most things wrong, but McClellan has had a pretty good handle on Clubman type racing, Sports 1300 as it now is. For some years he's been the dominant guy.
Yes, very good operator, Keith McClellan, well prepared, looks after his car, he does a good job, and of course it's well sorted. These cars have been around for quite a while, and they're very fast, nimble little car, very quick in around the back part of the circuit here, and indecently quick in a straight line.
So that's McClellan, well in command, as you might expect. from a 3.5-second margin in qualifying per lap. Space frame means it's just a real spaghetti arrangement of tubing, and that means they're very easy to repair. You can repair bits as jumping out of the slipstreams. John Burton in 41, going down for second place, and he's got it ahead of 46, David Brabham. So Brabham back to third, and up into second comes John Burton in the Robin. So things unchanged. Burton in 41 ahead of Brabham in 46. Alan Swain keeping on good pressure in car number 8 as they start lap 7 now. And here the battle for third and fourth place. Swain closing. And Brabham, and in front of them, Burton spinning in 41, so he's out of second place. So just 3.5 laps remaining to the finish, and he's lost some valuable ground. Up into second place comes David Brabham in 46. Alan Swain pretty close to him in number 8. But leading them all by a very comfortable margin, and in a stylish fashion, is Keith McClellan. The battle continues though. Second, Brabham. Third, Swain wanting him. Can't do anything for the moment though. Needs only about 1.5 seconds to gain the placing, but then is in trouble. And swooping past comes John Bishop in 77. So bad luck for Alan Swain as he goes slowly, and retiring the man who spun on lap 7, John Burton. 14.2 seconds the margin from McClellan, the race leader, in 5. Back to second place at the moment, David Brabham in 46, but the battle between the Asp, number 46, and the Panther Clubman, number 77, is on.
Yes, actually, Bishop is doing a good job. He's pulled this, the leading car in, or the number 2nd place car in, very well. And he's making a few moves on him already. And I think Burton's under a fair bit of pressure. He was under pressure.
And in fact, Bishop qualified only 8th fastest, back on a 44.85. He still hasn't sorted out the problem, but about to get some dust and grit in the odd stone nicely glued to the tyres, which are all warm, although these guys mightn't have their tyres quite as warm and in as good shape as people with bigger budgets. But this guy is it well under control in this 10-lap race. It's on his last lap now. And checkered flag for Keith McClellan in car number 5. And indeed, that was fatal for John Bishop to spin on the final lap, so that it gave a clear second place finally to David Brabham in 46. And then distantly into third place comes John Bishop in 77. This final lap desperation came to nothing. Second place on the track was David Brabham. John Bishop catching him in the latter part of the race at 77. Very keen to grab second on the track, and he just gets on too much power too early, coming out of the corner and goes round. But in front of him, Brabham had been penalised a minute for his jump start. Bishop wasn't overtaken by anybody, so the final result saw McClellan quite unchallenged. Bishop into second anyway. Durbin up into third in 53. Williamson fourth. Kirith fifth, and Alan Hunter sixth. So poor David Brabham nowhere after mucking up the start.
14, and it's showdown time for the Australian Sports Sedan Championships. On paper at least, Greg Crick has already won the title, 35 points clear of Mick Monterosso. But with the threat of the controversial Lakeside round hanging over their heads, there is another possibility. If Crick fails to finish and Monterosso finishes first or second, he can win the title.
Sound, thunder and fury, and Monterosso blasts away, leads them all, leads them comfortably. Gary Scott comes charging through, 12 cylinders, trying to haul him past the Honda. He doesn't quite make it. He gets up with Des Wall's Supra. Terry Bailey's Supra tucked in behind him. And it's all unleashed, and it's gone mad and wild in the Sports Sedan Championship. Crick is second, Gary Scott's third. Monterosso leads them on.
great start by Monterosso. Didn't get off the line. Got a good gap now, and he's up to them to pass him. He's going to drive around with the doors open, so we'll just see how he goes from here.
Crick chasing and doesn't have to win, but he wants to. Kerry Bailey's fourth. You see him the third of that group. There's Ball then, heads the next. Ian Luff tails that group with about 5 cars, but this man heads everyone. Mick Monterosso really does know how to use this simple little car. Great combination of a clever concept and well used, really well driven, well sorted. Not a big budget effort like Crick's car, which John Smith, and there you see Kerry Bailey punching down the inside in the Turbo Supra of the V12 Jaguar, and he hasn't held him off. In fact, Scott's got a big brake lock-up problem. Gets onto the straight, or at least the run round towards. Yes, onto the straight, okay. About a second between first and second place between Monterosso, and look at Bailey, brave. Trying to go down the inside of Scott. Loses a lot of ground finally when he changes his mind very wisely. Des Wall in behind is having a busy time also. Bit of a wide line there for Bailey.
Yes, he's drifted out quite wide like the car was pushing. Bailey's car seems very good in a straight line. It's got a big Chev in it as well. But Scott's very hard like to pass in the Jag. He's been there before plenty of times. And here's Crick right up at the back of Monterosso. We're starting to wear him down. Monterosso's car starts well, and the Crick car starts to come good about halfway through the race.
We were saying that the Crick car really is much more sophisticated.
Oh, absolutely.
Than the Monterosso little Escort.
Yeah, it's got Formula One style suspension and everything in the Crick car. It is a very, very sophisticated little car.
Not to mention the chassis of it too is pretty special.
Oh yes, it's based virtually on a Formula Holden type chassis, Formula Brabham, with a very heavy bulkheads, small area where the driver sits through with his legs sitting through the bulkheads, pull rod and push rod type suspension. Very sophisticated. Whereas the Escort is a bit more simple. It's got a wishbone type layout, but nothing like the sophistication of the Honda. And I find the Honda probably a little bit more brittle, not as robust a car to race.
Thundering down the straight now. And it was 0.3 of a second between the two of them. If it seemed a small gap, it was only because they were going so damn fast. Frighteningly fast, actually.
Monterosso's covering his ground, as you can see. Crick's all over him like a rash around the back of the circuit. Straight line performance, the Escort definitely got it on the Honda.
Crick's in.
Yes, snuck through. Good move.
And if the first race is anything to go by, it's all over, but Monterosso doesn't think so. But already power on nice and early out of that corner, and the Honda jumps away. There's a lap time that got Crick into the lead, averaging nearly 152 kilometres now, 33.23. Here it is, Crick leading Monterosso by only a bit over a second. 1 1/4 seconds, and it's only 1.9 over about the next 4 cars. Monterosso right back through that bunch, and Monterosso is possibly catching Greg Crick. He is. On this lap, he's closer than the previous one.
Oh, yeah. Monterosso, was he slowing in, or was it just an optical illusion? We'll have to check and see in the next frame. Yes, I reckon Monterosso's just dropped off.
Yep. Great shame. What a pity for Mick Monterosso, one of 2 brothers from...
Mind you, this car's suffered a fair bit of a hiding over the last few weeks, and it could be a bit of a legacy from the altercations they had up at Lakeside.
So, pressure off Crick, and Bailey up in front of Gary Scott.
See if Bailey can close the gap to Crick now. That is the question, see if he can do it. And it improved Bailey dramatically in the point scoring as well if Monterosso goes out of this heat. Because Bailey was sort of knocking on the door, I think, in their point score.
Well, now it's all really been split up, so the gap first to seconds, 2.5 seconds. Back to Kerry Bailey from Greg Crick. Not much to Gary Scott, doing everything he can in the big Jag, absolutely everything. Clipping the circuit on the outside, clipping it on the inside, blocking brakes sometimes. Still screaming the head off 12 cylinders of Jaguar engine, 5.3 litres.
He's still working very hard at it, Scott. You can see he's not giving up, and I think Scott is that sort of guy. He just keeps pressing on with the car and just waits to see what washes up. Actually, Crick's coming back to them as well. His 2-second gaps definitely shrunk back. I reckon it'll be just over a second now. Be less than a second.
Over the three of them, it's only 2.25.
Yeah.
And it was 1.9 back. Sorry, it was 2.5 back to second place a little while ago.
Bailey's the one that's got the move on.
He has got this thing operating. He's doing a good job, Kerry Bailey. Hasn't been motor racing that long.
Now, the car has been around for about 2 years, if I can remember rightly, but very well presented, a beautiful car.
Checkered flags out. It's Greg Crick hanging on to victory, ahead of Kerry Bailey by a very slim margin into third place. Gary Scott in the Jaguar, a lap car in among them there as they flashed across the finishing line. And then Deswall just in front of Brian Smith. So in a race time for the 8 laps of 12 minutes 36.76 by just 0.6 of a second. It's Crick from Bailey. The new Australian Sports Sedan champion is Crick. Gary Scott in the Jaguar not far away in third. Bit of a gap then to Des Wall and Brian Smith in close company, and a further 7 seconds to Jeff Barnes, 6th in number 6.
The winner of the Australian Sports Sedan Championship for 1991, Greg Crick. Greg, congratulations. How does it feel?
Thank you, John. It's a fantastic feeling to finally win the title.
6 wins for you, 5 for Mick Monterosso. It was a close Ford series.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Unfortunately, Mick stopped in the last one. John, if I might take this opportunity, these guys around me have helped me all year. They've worked their backsides off. They're all voluntary just to get me to this title, and I really owe them a big debt.
What are you going to do for them next year, Greg?
If we can get a major sponsor, we'll be back to try and win the title again next year, and hopefully they won't even have to pay their own airfares next year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now for the Thalgo Big Question, a fascinating competition with a $20,000 prize for the person who correctly rates those 7 machines from fastest to slowest against each other on a flying lap of Eastern Creek. And first man up is Scott Doohan, the oldest brother of Grand Prix motorcycle star Michael Doohan. This a Yamaha superbike, and that means it must only be 750 cc's and 4 cylinders. Gives about 135, 140 horsepower, 105 kilowatts, and at Bathurst even quicker than the 260 it does down the straight at Eastern Creek, probably 270 odd. And Scott Doohan, the man all the others most admire for what he has to do to make his machine go fast around Eastern Creek. Working it furiously, and in the modern motorcycle racing style, cranking off one side and the other, scraping the knee, sliding the rear end as he gets it on under power, and in some ways a harder bike to ride than a Grand Prix bike. It's heavier, it's slower to change direction, less stiff in the chassis, so it starts to work and to weave when he gets the power on just like that, and then he scrapes his knee. Scott Doohan, runner-up in the Australian Superbike Championship this year. A very busy man. Got it working nicely there as he comes out of the hairpin, and with a good time in hand, and very busy up through here. Got to set it up and then get back several gears, hook it round, make the second of the double apexes. There, and out, and onto the straight, and tucked down in behind the windscreen, trying to bring the elbows in, honking on to a sub 142nd time, 137.8. for Scott Doohan on the Peter Jackson Yamaha Superbike. And now up against him, you couldn't get two more disparate vehicles. A NASCAR Pennzoil Pontiac 5.8-litre Chevrolet engine, big engine, but only on carburetors, so well down on horsepower. On some of the other more sophisticated fuel injection machinery, Terry Byers, the pilot of this machine, well out of its normal and most favourable environment. These are made for banked ovals, and there can average more than 200 miles an hour, i.e. 300 kilometres an hour, and chasing Doohan's superbike time of 1:37.8. Byers really wrestling with the problem. Left-hand drive because the ovals go anti-clockwise, and so when they have their crashes, which they do frequently, it's the passenger side, the unoccupied side, that cops the most of the hammering. And going left and right around Eastern Creek instead of just left, which is its favoured environment, Byers is busy. A fairly slippery shape, funnily, because everything just about welded up. They slip through the air pretty well, but they don't stop awfully handily. And they're not really made for laying the power down and accelerating up to a speed. They're made for sustaining a speed. So as he's looking at Doohan's superbike time and coming round now to the corner on the top of the straight, needs to get to the finish in very sharp time indeed to beat Doohan. Now he's in his element. You can see the heat haze, but outside Doohan's time as he heads towards the finishing line, Terry Byers in the NASCAR Pennzoil Pontiac Grand Prix, well outside by some 5.8 seconds. And now Andrew Lindsay in the Eurotech Racing National Superkart. Superkarts have gears, and they can have anything up to 7. This is a single-cylinder 250, the third highest of 4 categories, and it's a rocket, and it could be a real fly in the ointment, except that he's got a problem. Getting all sideways there, he must have nipped up, just locked up the single-cylinder engine. So Andrew Lindsay not able to do his flying lap, and therefore gets a default time, a practice time from Saturday, by the rules of the competition, comes up ahead of Byers in the NASCAR Pontiac, behind Doohan, with George Parkinson now out in the Formula 2 Pro Flight Cheetah. This is a Mark 7 car from Brian Sheed in Melbourne, and the Volkswagen Golf engine makes it a very handy machine indeed. About 195 horsepower and about 225 kilometres an hour top speed. Fairly good rubber on it, not as big wheels and tyres as the Formula Brabhams that we'll see later, but bigger than the kart suspension, of course, which the kart didn't have. And George Parkinson, a very experienced competitor, and you can see working the machine very hard there. He gets it sideways, a little bit tentative as he corrects that, goes into the corner a second time, but got the Volkswagen Golf engine really singing as he heads up towards Corporate Hill, hooks it round the side there, and out of here, a slow corner will be good Formula 2 territory, because he'll be able to get all of the power on really quickly and hard, and he'll be very handy up through this right-hander. Won't change direction as quickly as the Yamaha Superbike did for Scott Doohan, but will hang on better at higher cornering speeds as he runs out onto the straight, chasing Doohan's time the fastest so far, 37.8. And down the straight comes Parkinson in the Formula 2 Cheetah, and going to beat the Superbike time by a very handy margin, virtually 5 seconds. So George Parkinson, the new leader, the new time to beat, with Greg Crick, the man that's chasing it right now. This, the most powerful, mean, brutal machine of the lot. Chevy engine thrown in under the Honda body, 5.8 litres. And a very sophisticated machine. If that was a Formula 2 machine, this is a bit close to being a Formula 1 machine with a body. Very similar to Formula 1 suspension underneath that. But it's a smoky Chevrolet V8 that the Tasmanian Greg Crick is driving. Australian sports sedan champion now in this car. So head of the formula. And 32.83 the time he's chasing. albeit pumping out a lot of smoke and looking precarious even just for one flying lap of Eastern Creek. But Crick not letting up. Very keen for as high a time and position as he can get in the Thalgo Big Question. The hairpin, the car should come out of this well, big rear wing, except for that engine problem. Been racing regularly throughout this meeting and indeed all the meetings at Eastern Creek this year, and doing times in 33s, 34s. Indeed, his best times earlier today, 33.02 and 33.07 in winning 2 races and the Australian Championship. Can he beat Parkinson's time? Have to be his best time ever around Eastern Creek for Crick, and he's done it. So he's gone into the lead now by that, what, 6/10 of a second. Crick, the Sports Sedan, leads the Formula 2. The Superbike of Doohan, Andrew Lindsay in the Supercart, and then Byers in the big thundering NASCAR. And now, here's the big question. The Peter Jackson Sierra Cosworth Group A touring car, Glenn Seaton, the quickest of these cars this year, and top speed every bit of 290 kilometres an hour, and every bit of that horsepower, some 550. And Seaton, one of the young talents of Australian motor racing, would have looked at the kart with great interest, because that's from whence he came, and one of the really unlucky men at Bathurst last weekend. So disappointed with all the effort that he's put into his racing this year. Seaton really does know how to use this Sierra well. The engine prepared by his father Beau, who won at Bathurst way back in 1965. And this young man, out of karting and then sharing a Ford Capri with his father at Bathurst to several class victories, really knows how to make the best of these fearsomely effective touring cars, Group A. And funnily should have a fairly comparable time with the motorcycle equivalent of Group A, the Superbike of Scott Doohan. Superbikes are the two-wheel equivalent of Group A, and you can see how he's comparing now as he comes down out of that hairpin from Corporate Hill, just through this right-hander, and now really busy in the 6-speed gearbox, going up a cog, but then very busy getting back to second gear, trying to get the thing on the maximum turbo boost, chasing the Sports Sedan time, a much more powerful car, much torquier and lighter, the one that's got the fastest time so far in the Thalgo Big Question. Glenn Seaton down towards the finishing line outside that time, but how does he compare to the others? Where does he slot in this Group A touring car just outside Scott Doohan on the Superbike by 0.8 of a second? And now the man that should be fastest, Mark McLaughlin, the Tasmanian who went to South Australia, then to New South Wales to go motor racing in Formula Brabham. The Thalgo, Ralt Spa, and capable of 23s. So, barring errors, barring big problems, it should be by far the quickest time around here. And indeed, to look at it another way, even if he isn't hot on to the best time able to be done by a Formula Brabham, then he should be able to do a comfortable, safe sort of time that should put him at the head of the field. McLaughlin this season having a disappointing time in the car, and for this meeting, a lot of work done on the chassis, but he said it was still working. It still wasn't stiff and giving the sort of suspension work and the precision in steering and so on that we need, and not doing anything like the times that McLaughlin's capable of, or indeed the car. But 32.19, the best time so far, Greg Crick in the Sports Sedan, and Mark McLaughlin working on the problem. Now out of that hairpin, quicker than anybody else to there in 60 seconds. Swooping through this right-hander, tremendous territory for a single-seater with 300 odd horsepower. Really good onto the straight. The non-turbo thing will wind its way up through the torquey V6 engine, down the straight, looking at a good time, nowhere near the best time for the class, but it's looking good enough to take place at the top of the field, and it does. McLaughlin at 1:28.06 puts it very comfortably by more than 4 seconds at the head of the field, and giving the rating of the Formula Brabham first, Sports Sedan second, Formula 2 third, the two-wheeler fourth, and Glenn Seaton in the Group A touring car comes in fifth ahead of Andrew Lindsay in the Supercar, Terry Byers in the Pontiac, and finally Dennis Neal, the winner, with wife Amanda heading off on this tremendous prize. Coming round now for the final round, the 7th in the TUI's Australian Drivers' Championship here at Eastern Creek. And this is the way they line up. Mark Scaife, the new CAMS Gold Star Australian champion drivers on pole. Simon Kane doing only his 2nd race in this year's championship, who's handed over his title to Scaife, who's beside him. Then it's Mark Larkham and Mark McLaughlin bringing up the 2nd row. Paul Morris and Tony Blanche. Morris hasn't shown the fire that he's shown at a couple of previous rounds. And then Searle and Hocking further back. In car 5 is Keith Carling, Brian Sampson, and then into the Formula 2s of George Parkinson, and in 21, Rob McCoy. This, the race face of Mark Scaife, 24 years old. Young talent with all the opportunity. And for 12 laps, can somebody else head him for a while? And Kane has done it. Scaife's given away. He's gone in behind him. So Kane and then Larkham goes through too, but Scaife goes right round the outside of him and says, I want 2nd at least. So Larkham, who dominated the first rounds, back to 3rd. Keith Carling's on his outside in the yellow car 5. But Simon Kane leads. Come on, show some fire, Kane, and see if he can do it. And in fact, it's McLaughlin now up in front of Keith Carling. And that's not surprising. Carling, sports sedan driver, having his first drive in this single-seater. Then in car 4 is Brian Sampson.
See how Simon Kane goes now. He's got the bit between his teeth. He's in the front, in the lead, and it is very difficult to pass these cars from behind around this circuit. If you lead on the first lap, you've got an excellent chance. We'll just see what fight.
Looks like something running wide there.
Yeah, it looked like Mark Scaife ran very wide. He survived. He's still on the circuit, but maybe just an optical illusion.
He's 0.6 of a second behind.
And he's on the first lap. That's a good lead. So we'll just see how he goes and whether he can keep it up, withstand the pressure.
In past races, we've seen Paul Morris, Warwick Brooklyn, Mark Larkham lead Scaife convincingly. In fact, Larkham went on through to make it victory in round 1 down the straight, and he holds on to a 0.42 advantage. So Scaife between Corporate Hill and here has picked up 0.18 of a second, and that's a genuine gain.
He's through.
Oh, gee. Simon Kane's just learned something, hasn't he? That's a big hole to leave. I mean, you're just not watching your mirrors, you're not positioning your car.
He just surrendered the lead very easily.
Yeah, he gave it a... Oh! Gee, he would have taken them both out there. That was frightening, actually, if he'd gone on with that.
We just see, obviously, he's woken himself up to the fact that, you know, he's racing against a very formidable opponent in Mark Scaife, and he's really, you have to have your wits about you. You can't give him half a gap.
I think you're right, John. I think that Simon Kane might be saying, hang on a moment, he's moved up a gear or so in his head, and realising from the first race that Mark Scaife's a hard man to beat. It's 0.3 of a second between the two.
And now the pressure's right back on Kane to do something about it. He's obviously got the speed, and it's a matter of he's able to put the laps together to get up alongside Scaife.
I rather suspect, I'm not sure, I'm going to stop watch on it at the moment, but I think Scaife might have been pushed up into faster lap times than he's been producing for a little while. Although the gap's gone out to 0.9 of a second. He was quick down the straight that time, and I bet he was quick through that bottom corner.
Corner coming onto the straight, that's Scaife's going. He's very good at it.
And off the start, Paul Morris there. Oh. Boy, oh boy, on the grass in the inside, the thing's come right round, so he's gone off the circuit backwards. He wasn't doing that at a flying lap speed.
No, he's lucky. I'd say something's broken in the car if that happened. To go off for that particular speed.
24 years old Paul Morris, his race run. Oh, his race resumed.
It might have been, oh, he's back on the circuit.
Yeah, so Morris is running again, and he'll learn plenty about that sort of thing and recovery and keeping going. And he gets into the Benson and Hedges BMW team for next year, where he has a ride. And Scaife Yes, into the 24s, about a second faster than the previous race, bringing the average nearly to 168 kilometres an hour. And as an average speed, you're travelling very quickly if you're averaging more than 100 miles an hour. Boy, oh boy.
Oh, incredibly quick around here. These cars do fly. It's a shame that the television does slow them down so much, because live they are very, very fast.
1.63 seconds the lead now. Lot less back to Larkham in third place. And Mark Larkham in the Peter Boylan Racing Ralt RT20. And the thing really hopping there. Skates put in 168 average.
And Larkham's hanging on to them this time, which is the best run we've seen from Larkham since probably the first round. And if he keeps it up, you never know, he might be able to wear Simon down as well.
Paul Morris making progress forward, recovering well.
So, one of the Phoenix Motorsport cars from Eastern Creek, going past the Dave Moore car, Keith Carling driving. This is Keith Carling's first outing in this particular car. He's been driving sports sedans. It's a major eye-opener about the levels of grip and performance that these cars are.
He'll be a very dissatisfied sports sedan driver of that 300ZX when he eventually gets it reliable. Tremendous potential. Fairly dusty Shrike here. Paul Morris, Queenslander.
Yes, as I was saying before in the earlier heat too, the people running the Shrike cars are well and truly up against it compared to the imported cars. The development that goes on overseas so much with the other chassis is probably tenfold what you'd ever get in Australia.
It's a great concept of having students and teachers involved in this. Tremendous incentive, great experience for them, but they're up against people whose whole life, their profession, and sometimes 20 or more years of knowledge is in building and developing racing cars.
That's right, and that's the problem they have. Well, when you see it, that, you know, full marks to the TAFE people and to Mike Quinn, who's been campaigning these cars this year. He's done a remarkably good job, but they are up against it.
Keith Carling in 5.
That's the former car that I ran last year. Dave Moore, the man from Moore Engineering that owns the car.
Morris coming through on Tony Blanche, car number 12.
Morris moved up another spot, so he's driving very well, very aggressively. I don't know what happened in the first corner. Obviously, he must have done something, but the car's obviously come out of it all right. It looked like something had broken, but obviously not. Morris still doing good times in the car and it's driving very hard.
Mark Scaife moving ever onward. Car number 7 being dispatched, George Parkinson, the cheetah. It's in the Thalgo Big Question competition. And the confidence to take it right to the lip of the track, just raising the dust, but doing it very precisely, not hanging it right over in the dust. Mark Scaife.
I understand the black flag for Tony Blanche is that he actually didn't make it to the grid. So.
7 seconds, Scaife's advantage now over Simon Kane. And the black flag coming out again. Tony Blanche trying to get the message through to him.
This is about the third lap he's had there. Scaife's car stepping out quite wide, on a bit on the dirt, using all the road, right on the verge. Nothing dramatic, but it just shows how hard he's driving the car. Actually, Scaife's got a commanding lead now. He should be able to pull the revs back a bit, just look after the car a little bit more.
7 seconds. Margin and constantly just whipping up a little bit of dust. Barely on it, enough air drag there to pull the dust up anyway.
And here's the gap to Simon Kane from Scaife, second place. 8.46, nearly 8.5 seconds, and back to thirds, 2.95. So nobody able to do much about it. Mark Larkham can't get forward and on to Kane.
Kane's only got half a lap to do it now. They're on their last lap. And I'd say he's settled for second place. There's no way he look like getting anywhere near Scaife.
Just as Scaife is hot this year, all the developing and driving that he's been doing for Nissan, plus this TUI's Australian Drivers' Championship, so too Simon Kane should be, albeit not here at Eastern Creek and not in this type of car, but in Formula 3000, much quicker, more powerful cars than these. They really do take some driving.
Oh, that's right. Incredible levels of grip that they have, and straight line performance. They're absolutely sensational thing to drive.
You have to drive them with a fair bit of budget as well.
Very, very tall checkbook.
So Mark Scaife coming down for yet another victory. Single-seaters, but he's had a few this year in touring cars as well. And this is a pretty convincing one over the man whose title he's taken. Simon Kane coming home into second place in car number 1. So another one for Mark Scaife, this time 9.13 seconds in front of the former Australian driving champion Simon Kane. Not far back to Mark Larkham, but a fair gap back to Mark McLaughlin, very disappointed with his car. Paul Morris and Ron Searle in very close company, just 900ths of a second, 800ths between the two of them.
Mark Scaife, it's not champagne, but it must taste just as good. Congratulations on the Australian title.
Thanks, John. The cars were very good then.
Glorious day in Sydney to Australia's best motor racing facility, Eastern Creek Circuit, west of the city. Already in 3 previous meetings this year, we've had some wild and mad motor racing and some incredible incidents. There's nothing quite as crazy as the Holden HQs, or as close as the street sedans in Group E, or as unpredictable as the Formula Vs. The Formula 2 sound glorious, look and sound just like thoroughbred racing cars. The sports sedans are just brutal, and the Formula Brabhams efficiently fast. Today we have the final rounds of the Australian Sports Sedan Championship and also the TUI's Australian Drivers' Championship in the Formula Brabhams. Last weekend at Lakeside, the sports sedans had an incredible dust-up. There's lots of acrimony and a very close point score, as you can see. All of it won't be resolved on the racetrack today, but we'll hear more about that shortly from John Smales. In the Formula Brabhams, Mark Scaife is almost certainly the winner. Theoretically, Paul Morris can win it, but he's really got to rely on an enormous amount of bad luck from Mark Scaife to do so. Putting aside his driving gloves yet again and joining me in commentary, John Smith. And John, Mark Scaife really has earned his laurels in the Australian Drivers' Championship.
Oh, definitely. Well, Mark Scaife, probably the form driver of 1991, I would say.
And in various categories.
Oh, in touring cars, these particular cars, the Formula Brabham cars, which are very difficult cars to drive, and he's done it with great ease.
But a man who could upset him is the reigning Australian champion driver, Simon Kane. He's back for this meeting.
Yeah, Simon's been overseas racing in Formula 3000 in Europe this year with mixed success, but he's come back and he's really put a cat amongst the pigeons, and I think he'll do a good job.
Again this weekend, we've got new categories at Eastern Creek. Today, it's Sports 1300s and all